you're in a foreign country, right? You've come out of the army, you've gone through pretty horrific divorce, you've gone through trying to transition, finding a job in the midst of COVID. I mean, it's like the perfect storm. That would break most people, right?
Take the easy road financially, go back, join the army, back to Canada. And so it was brutal, absolutely. But on the other hand, I was so happy.
Welcome to Unfinished, where we, the over 50, declare that we are absolutely not finished. We explore health, continued growth, new learning, new businesses, new relationships, and how we live intentionally to make the rest of our lives the best of our lives. Super excited today. My guest is my friend Tim Partello, who will introduce himself in a sec. But Tim is an example, and with his wife Cara, of how we can change our lives materially at any stage of our lives. So we're going to unpack that, and then let Tim also then take us on a little bit of a journey into his past. Tim, please introduce yourself, my friend.
Wow, where to start? So that my accent doesn't distract everyone. I'm Canadian, not American, Canadian. I've been left Canada in 2017 at the end of a almost 30-year career as a professional soldier and officer in the Canadian Army, in the Royal Canadian Regiment. As a result of meeting Cara, so I suppose I'm rambling a bit here, but so what am I? I'm a 54-year-old retired Army officer, former business owner, sailor, traveler, seeker. I don't know. I'm not sure what else to.
No. There's a lot in that. So I'll tell you where we're going to start, which is, okay, you came to the UK in 2017, I think. Well,
yeah.
But when I met you after that, you had got divorced, met Cara, got married, bought a house, started a business, which is how we met, the CrossFit Free Soul. You then sold the business, sold the house, bought a boat, and went sailing. Right. So that is a significant change.
Absolutely.
I think let's start there, Tim. Take us through, the rationale for why you were in this country.
Sure. Yeah.
The tail end of your military career. Right. And then just the journey to meeting Cara and starting the business, and then ultimately undoing that. The sailing, we definitely want to talk about the sailing. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to join you guys for a week, which is one of the best weeks I've ever had. So let's go through that journey, because that is a significant change, and then we'll peel back a little bit and we'll go back before that.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2017, I was a lieutenant colonel in the Canadian Army. I'd just done a couple of years in our Ministry of Defense, National Defense Headquarters as a staff officer, working in kind of a pressure cooker operations environment in managing operations overseas and things like that. And I was at a point, I was at a bit of a crossroads in my career. I knew, having been told, that I wasn't going to advance into the very rare roles at that rank level and higher, where you're back in the field with soldiers doing operational things. I was going to spend the rest of my career, pushing paper and making PowerPoint slides and things like that.
The corporate version, the military version of a corporate.
Yeah. So I had started at that point thinking about transitioning, and I was at about the 27 and a half year mark in terms of time served in the regular Army. I had a couple years in the reserve force as a older teenager before I joined the regular Army. So I started looking at transitioning maybe into the corporate world. I had a few mates who'd done that. And were quite successful, and gave me really positive kind of feedback about the kinds of things I could do and salaries I could make and all those sorts of things. And as a sort of a bit of that, I chose, because I had fortunately some options at that point. I chose to come to England into a role as the Canadian Army liaison officer to the British Army. Knowing that it was going to be a job where I was going to be very independent, sort of make my own work type of a role. Absolutely no pressure. It's not an operational role, so it's not a role where we're dealing with minute by minute, well, Canada and the UK are in Iraq together and what's going on. It's more a role about the institution, about training, about long-term equipment programs,
logistics, and all
all the ceremonial stuff, that sort of thing. So I chose that to come here as a change. And I also felt like it might be a bit of a refresh for my marriage at the time. Slow down, not being away from home, a bit of an exciting adventure for the family, coming to a different country, all that sort of thing. So that's what brought me here in 2017. We uprooted ourselves and moved the whole family here to the UK. I was married at the time and had 3 kids with my former wife. And kind of settled into a really sleepy, like no one paid any attention. My boss is 5 time zones away and wasn't paying any attention to what I was doing anyways. Obviously, like in the UK, our focus at that strategic political level is all in the US. So there were 13 Army liaison officers in the US and 1 in the UK. And that was me. So obviously all the attention was there. But also was, it was a period where I somewhat intentionally forced myself to reinvent myself, because for all of my adult life, I'd been a soldier. I was very fortunate in my career. I got to do a lot of really kind of high speed things, lots of operational experiences, all the sort of ticks in the box that you would imagine, sort of the Hollywood version of a soldier does. I got to do all of those things.
I mean, you were much more than a regular soldier, but we'll come to that. We'll
absolutely. But a lot of that is like, you work hard and you do your best to be good at what you're doing, but then there's an awful lot of like in the right place at the right time. And, those opportunities have to be available to you. Lots and lots of guys and gals worked just as hard or harder or were more talented than me, but didn't have the opportunity in that sort of time and space sense to do a lot of the stuff that so anyways, had a great career, but that was like everything of who I was. And I'd put my heart and soul into it. So, forced myself somewhat intentionally to redefine myself, imagine myself going into the corporate world, and doing what I had been doing, but in a commercial sense, leading people, managing people.
There's I've just thought of something that's quite interesting, actually. I think, being in the military, there is a natural shelf life, right? You're in the military for so long, and then typically you come out and you're probably roughly early 50s or thereabouts. And that's not just true. Canada, I have friends in the UK. So there's a little bit about you're almost forced to reinvent yourself.
Absolutely,
right? Whereas if I look at somebody like myself and people who come from a corporate background, there isn't that trigger, so you find a lot of people in their 50s and 60s, sort of floating around the corporate world, utterly dissatisfied and unable to make the change. So I think in a sense, it's almost fortunate because of the career you had where you got to an inflection point where you kind of have to reinvent yourself, right? Because you're young enough, it's not like you're leaving the military at 70, right? So
that's true.
It just struck me that's different. Whereas the corporate world, there isn't that natural exit. So people end up staying there, and there's a huge negative ramifications to that.
Well, and there are in the Canadian Armed Forces, you can serve till you're 60. We're desperate for people right now and have been, most of my latter part of my career. So you could stay till 60.
Okay.
But I knew because I was not going to progress in terms of going back to operational units, commanding a battalion, commanding a brigade, and so on. Immediately, because I was an infantry officer, you're now deselected from advancement. And so I would have likely spent the rest of my career as a lieutenant colonel. And I could have served another, 13, 14 years, 15 years till I was 60. But my ego is too fragile to do that. And I worked with lots of folks, especially at the National Defense Headquarters, who were in their late 50s, lieutenant colonels, and they were experts at what they did. And they were people that the seniors absolutely relied on, because they were the go-to guy for, what's going on in Poland. They were the go-to guy for Poland, or they were the go-to guy on ISIS or whatever, because they'd made a career of it. But my ego is too fragile to stay uncompetitive and watch my peers and my juniors go past me and then end up working for them. And I'm freely admit that. So I needed to redefine myself. So came to the UK, and it was great from a redefining, focus on family, focus on myself perspective. Professionally and personally, it was absolutely horrible. I hated not being important, not being in a role in the center of things. I got to answer questions about, like, can you please connect me with whoever's working on the latest night vision equipment development, and just absolute stuff that's important.
It is important.
Again, my fragile ego needed to be, there's a hostage taking. We need you to, get with the, RCMP hostage negotiating team, and, all that, high, Hollywood stuff. And that, again, I suppose it's a bit of a character flaw, but that's who I was. So really was a good kick in the butt for me. And it also helped me to go through what I would call, understanding it sounds a bit melodramatic, a bit of a period of mourning for the soldier me. That I knew was done, and all of the things that I had loved and that had fed my ego and that I'd thrived on all through my career. And it was good to be here, 5 time zones away from all my mates, who were carrying on and going on to command battalions and brigades and deploying and commanding task forces in northern Iraq and in Ukraine and all this sort of a thing. To be completely detached from that. And allow myself to be sad that part of my life was done and that I needed to do.
There's an interesting phenomena that, without going into detail, they say that depression, the symptoms of depression are often no different from grief.
Right.
And there was a study that was done on this, and often we grieve. We get to a stage in life where you were grieving for the former soldier you were, but I went through. I was grieving for the youthful version of myself, and I think a lot of people, that's people get sad and or depressed sort of in their 50s, and that's actually grief for what you were and who you were and whatever. I think it's natural, and I think the positive thing is we come out of that, right? We can come out of that if we look to intentionally reinvent. What am I going to make of the rest of my life? And it's but we probably do need to go through that grief process.
Absolutely. And I think as the soldier, grieving for my soldier life, very closely tied to youthfulness and all of that, because of course, being a frontline operational guy almost all of my career, it's very physical, it's athletic, you're in you're in front, you're leading, you're taking risks, like it's all tied to youthfulness and athleticism and all of that sort of thing as well, at least certainly in my career. So here I am, I'm in the UK, I'm like, kind of working from home part of the time, the leisurely going into the office, for 3-4 days a week, 5 days a week, doing the odd little thing, conferences and, being the token Canadian in a group of foreign officers who are, sort of sidelined, not in a negative way, but, you're not part of the pulse of British Army headquarters. And sort of, like I said, detached from everything going on, which is good for me because I can think about who I am and go through this process of being sad for, that part of my life being over. And like I said earlier, I kind of was hoping that it would be a bit of a reset for my marriage. I'd been unhappy in my marriage for quite a few years by that point, and I really thought uh, that this would allow me to refocus, reset, and also a bit of a test for retirement because our kids were teenagers. My
Yeah.
oldest was doing a gap year, our first year here in the UK, and then she was going back to Canada to start uni. Um, our middle son was in his last year of high school, which he did in a boarding school in Switzerland, a Canadian boarding school in Switzerland. So there was this sort of like empty nest on the horizon. And I thought, having some time at home, it's going to be a rehearsal for me and my relationship with my wife at the time. And of course, what I concluded in this whole sort of soul searching, rediscovering myself was that I was absolutely, utterly unhappy. And there was no coming back from that.
Yeah.
And part of the catalyst for that was meeting Cara, who isn't my current wife, as you know.
And I think, it's you've got to be receptive to that, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, the sad reality is, Tim, so many people end up staying in that marriage situation, and we have so little time on this planet, man. It's just, and I know it's a bit like the analogy I use is like, if you've got a lingering toothache, you can live with it for the rest of your life, or you go to the dentist. It's short, sharp pain, but then it's gone, right? And it is painful, and I know your situation is extremely, extremely painful, but it's tragic when people stay in that situation, because it kind of, that negativity. I happen to know somebody in that situation, and she wants to reinvent herself. She wants to change her life, but she can't. She's stuck because everything is negative. Everything she wants to do, she gets dragged down. It's and the reality is the only exit for her is to exit that
relationship,
marriage. And that's tough. That's not easy, right?
Yeah, so I was on this track that my posting here to the UK was meant to be 3 years. I was working with a sort of executive career transition counselor in Toronto, figuring out what I could do, what I would like to do, what I was good at doing, where was a good fit for me in the corporate world. I was, meeting people in the corporate world in Toronto. So the whole kind of plan was I'd do my 3 years here in the UK. I'd take all this time I had because I wasn't busy professionally to focus on this transition. And then I would get posted back to Canada. I would, and I would transition out of the armed forces into a prearranged corporate role somewhere in Toronto, you know, in the financial district in Toronto, kind of a thing. And make multiple six figures a year for the next 10 years and have this great retirement for my wife and I. And of course that was, essentially I completely derailed all of that when I left my ex-wife to be with Cara. And that was at about the 2-year mark out of what meant to be a 3-year posting. And then that was more difficult than it would normally be leaving a marriage, because we were, here in the UK on kind of a diplomatic posting. When you separate under those circumstances, there's all kinds of jurisdictional issues. We owned a house in Toronto, like, are we going to get divorced under English law? Are we going to get divorced? Essentially, the default setting for the Canadian Armed Forces is if a couple who are posted overseas separate, they just instantly reset and they post you back to Canada.
Which kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not what you
wanted.
That's
not what I wanted. So my wife, I initially asked the Army to let me stay. And, that was a non-starter. Again, it's just a policy. There wasn't any,
and it makes sense.
It does. It makes sense from a practical perspective. And normally, had I not met Cara here and wanted to stay in the UK, normally it would have made perfect sense. So anyway, I got posted, sort of nominally posted into a role as like a a G1, which is like a personnel administration officer in Toronto, at the division headquarters, one of our division headquarters in Toronto. I got posted into that position, although I never actually filled that role, because I essentially said to the Army, look, if you won't let me stay in the UK, then I'm going to retire. I'm going to leave the armed forces because I want to stay here. So
that's a big decision.
it was a massive decision, except
in a sea of turmoil.
Except that I'd already made the decision that I was going to leave. So I didn't need to make a decision to leave the Army. It was a timing decision.
A timing, right? Yeah, okay.
And it was a bigger risk, because in my plan, I was going to have this corporate job lined up in Toronto, that I was going to leave the Army, on Friday and start on Monday. And now I'm putting in my paperwork to retire from,
and you don't know what
27
there isn't that job
career, and there's no job there. And also in the process of a divorce, which was very, very bitter, because I'd had an affair with Cara, and of course my ex was, all of the things you could imagine, betrayed and all of that sort of thing. And she's a very strong-willed lady, and she made it as difficult as possible, emotionally, financially, everything else. So it was a bitter, bitter divorce. So I, financially, and having been in the Army for my whole adult life, I was to a certain degree institutionalized. I had a steady salary. I didn't need to worry about finding a doctor.
It's the only life you knew, essentially.
Yeah. And I mean, I didn't even budget, my ex had always managed the money because I was away a lot of the time. And in the early days, before internet and smartphones and stuff, back in the Bosnia days, I'd be away and get 1 9-minute phone call a week. So, I wasn't involved in it anyways. So certainly the difficulty was in that there was no question in my mind that that's what I needed to do, because I knew I was going to be here with Cara. Everything else came after that, and it was going to be a matter of problem solving and figuring out. And to be honest, it was, to a certain degree, gratifying to have some challenges again to overcome, where I'd gone through this 2-year period of being a wallflower, the Canadian flag hanging in the conference room, to now I've got a crisis I've got to manage. I've got to figure out how I'm going to finance this divorce. I've got to figure out how I'm going to stay in the UK. How do I get a visa? Because I was here under an armed forces visa, and as soon as I left the military, that was no longer valid. How do I stay in? So I had all these obstacles, and now I'm back in the crisis center managing an operation. So I mean, not to downplay the stress of all of that,
I get it.
The expense and everything else. But anyway, so long story short, I went back to Canada. I got out of the Army. Meanwhile, I'd started applying furiously for jobs here in the UK, and I had gotten, I had a affiliate of my career counselor in Toronto here in the UK, so I had some contact through him, but he wasn't really useful at like introductions. And as so at a certain level in the corporate world, it's all about just being, what puts your CV on the top of the pile? It's the fact that you had coffee or lunch with someone and they think you'd be a good fit.
100%.
But sort of, miraculously at that point, this is the autumn of 2019. So I left my ex in July of 2019, and now we're going through she's meanwhile gone back to Canada. I've moved in with Cara, I'm getting out of the Army.
And for context, Cara was going through a similar situation.
She was going through her divorce.
She was going through her divorce as well.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, I'm putting out CVs. I'm literally just like, trolling for job adverts, corporate kind of director, deputy director kind of role level, which is sort of the level I was at in the Army. And firing CVs in the blind, CVs are, and I basically got a call back from a company in Maidenhead. It's Maidenhead, right? Just this side of on the M4. Yeah, Maidenhead. I always get it mixed up with Maidstone.
Yeah, Maidenhead.
Yeah. And so interviewed, and they seemed kind of catchy, and they were a company that did kitchen maintenance. So they commercial kitchen maintenance. So they had like engineers all over the country that went in and fixed big. And it was as the operations director. And they were keen to, they'd sort of reached that 150 person. They were a bit bigger than that, but personnel mark, where they knew they couldn't be a small company anymore. They couldn't get by on personal relationships. They needed systems, and they needed like, to sort of just break through that barrier. And that was, essentially over a long hiring process and getting a work visa and all of that. I ended up, getting hired by this company as their operations director to help them expand. They were looking at overseas markets. They already had a bit of a footprint in the Middle East, or in the Gulf rather. Anyways, so it's like, hey, this is great. I never, ever imagined myself working for a company that fixed cookers and freezers and, you know what I mean? But from an ops perspective, it's really straightforward. You send people out with equipment to do a job and bring them back again. I mean, that's what I did in the Army at more senior levels, and worked within a budget, and obviously, managed quality control and, personnel frictions, and the office-based staff, the command post versus the guys in the field. And I mean, it was super familiar to me. So went back to Canada, got out of the Army. This was sort of Christmas time. It was just after Christmas. I went back to Canada. So it would have been around New Year's of 2020. Back to Canada to go through the formal process of getting out of the Army, to turn my kid in, have a medical exam,
before COVID.
Get briefed on my pension and all this stuff. So I was in Canada for about 2 months waiting for my work visa, because this company that hired me hadn't ever done a work visa before. So they had to become sponsors, and there's a whole process for that. And then at the beginning, right at the end of February, kind of first week of March, my work visa was approved. I flew back to the UK. I started work. And of course, as I'm flying back to the UK, it's the stuff about this coronavirus and is in the news. And you think, oh, well, it's another bird flu. It's, and by the end of March, I was out of work. I was the newest kind of C-suite guy. And then the marketing director was he was a Kiwi, and he'd been hired about 6 weeks before me. And the company just took a complete nosedive in those first kind of 3-4 weeks of COVID. Because they did commercial kitchens, they did a lot of the kitchens in the office buildings in Canary Wharf, which were empty. They did schools like Ascot, the race course at Ascot, Eton. They did all of the royal residences, which were immediately locked down to protect the Queen and Prince Philip's health. So like, there was literally no work. There was literally no work. And so, you can't keep the new guys on. So they shrunk the company. And because I was on a work visa and I was still on probation, I wasn't entitled to any kind of, I can't remember what they called it, but there was like a compensation you could get if you were made redundant because of COVID. I wasn't entitled to any of that. So they gave me like a month's salary and said, sorry, good luck.
Wow.
And they promised to keep me on the books for about 6 months so that my work visa wouldn't immediately expire. So they kept me on the books even though I wasn't employed and I wasn't being paid. So that was the kind of end of March 2020. Jeez. So now I'm in the middle of this absolutely adversarial divorce in Canada, where I'm just spending money. I'm out of work. I'm now taking a pension, which is about, 65% of what I was earning when I was serving. Car is going through a divorce. We're renting here in the UK. We needed 2 cars because we were both working. So I'd just gotten a, nice brand new Volvo for
on the basis
commuting
of being employed
on the M4, on a lease. So there's a monthly payment. Anyways, so it's just, a bit of a nightmare.
Jesus.
So, of course, immediately went into job hunting mode. But in that first year of COVID, I mean, who's hiring a guy who is an ops guy who needs a work visa? Like, it was absolutely I don't want to say
almost the worst case scenario.
almost the worst case
Yeah.
scenario. It wasn't hopeless.
Yeah.
There were, I did have a few opportunities, by big companies. But it always came down at the last minute when it went to the HR guys. Well, actually, the number 2 or number 3 guy or girl on our list is British and they don't need a work visa, so they can start tomorrow. Whereas it's going to take 4 weeks for us to process your work visa, kind of a thing. So,
and also you're a generalist in the market versus
Absolutely.
being highly
Yeah,
specialist,
absolutely,
which
yeah.
is, I know from my corporate experience, having, I put people through the process of getting a visa sponsored, is almost always for some highly specialized
That's right.
that you
Yeah.
need, right? So,
Yeah.
because otherwise you will take the local person.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, and that, that was in the Canadian Army as an infantry officer, you're trained as a generalist. You work across different, like I said, the role I was posted into was an HR role back in Canada. So that, and I'd been in HR, more junior HR roles, so that I could learn that stuff. And the idea is, as you rise higher in command, you've got experience across all these
And so the corporates work
Yeah,
exactly the same way. To become a general manager of something, you need to spend time so you can understand finance and marketing and HR and ops. Yeah.
So anyways, so hopeless. So I job hunted full time, literally full time. I mean, I got up in the morning, sending CVs, making calls, searching the resources, 8 hours a day, kind of a thing, from March, or I guess the beginning of April, until about November. And then I was like psychically shattered at that point.
I was going to say,
it was so demoralizing. And I mean, I didn't feel sorry for myself or anything like that, but it was just,
a lot of people would.
It was just like yeah. I mean, it was brutal. It was brutal. And like I said, at the same time, I'm cashing out investments in Canada, my retirement, on top of my army pension, to pay for this divorce and taking money from my dad. And, Dad, I've got a $30,000 legal bill and I don't have the money for it. Can you help me, please? That kind of a thing. All at the same time, right? And going through all the other emotional stuff with children and, anyways. So I got to November and I thought, I just need to take a break. Like, obviously, this is like, you can't give up because you have to live your life.
Yeah.
And I was determined to stay here in the UK and make it work with Cara. But I needed to stop. I needed to take a break. So about November of 2020, I just said, okay, I'm gonna, for the foreseeable, no timeline, but for now, I'm just not going to apply to any more jobs. I'm not going to do any more interviews on Zoom or Skype, and put yourself through that whole ringer. Some companies, not like Amazon, they make you do all this testing and it's just like, I did that 2 or 3 times with Amazon, for example. Anyways, I need a break from that. So I did nothing. Cara was working. She was working from home. She was working for like a car finance company. Stuff she could do from home. So I, shopped, I cleaned house, I did laundry, I cut the lawn, we worked out every day because she was at home. I did some volunteering. I did some volunteering at the veterans group, in the bigger kind of COVID picture. I did some local volunteering, taking elderly or doing the shopping for an elderly lady. I mean, I just did what I could to keep busy, and it was actually quite, it was what I needed. It was kind of a big recharge. So by Christmas, the end of Christmas of that year, we'd then gotten out of our rental. We'd bought a house. We moved into our house, I think the day before Christmas Eve, like December 23rd or something, moved into our house. The divorces were pretty much settled at that point.
Yeah.
So there was some financial security in the sense that, we knew where we were from what was now, how much sort of savings we had longer term. And then we also knew from an income perspective, because it had been almost a year, we'd been living on my pension and what Cara was making. So, we sort of had some, and then, so we had some stability, financial stability at that point. But I started thinking, what can we do now? Like, I need to do something. I can't be a house husband.
Just before we go there, just pause quickly. I just want to go back because, I mean, just so that everybody understands, because you've lived it, but I mean, you've come out of, you're in a foreign country, right? You've come out of the army. You've gone through a pretty horrific divorce. You've gone through trying to transition, finding a job in the midst of COVID. I mean, it's like the perfect storm. You really think about it. And I mean, that was like at least a 12-month period.
Yeah.
And I think, Tim, that would break most people, right? That would break most people. Now, that, there's a positive. You'd found Cara, right? But that is a brutal
but it's
process.
a big positive. I mean, that was, my motivation to stay in this country. Because I mean, at any point I could have said,
check out.
Screw it. I'm going to go back to Canada, get back in the army and carry on, and then suddenly have a big 6-figure salary again, and all that stability. But at that point, my children weren't speaking to me. So there was let me back up and just summarize initially. So there was no motivation whatsoever to go back to Canada.
Yeah, no, I get that.
My ex-wife had made a very concerted and successful effort to isolate me.
Yeah.
Not only from my children, but also from my social group in the army, because we'd been married for 22 years. And so all of my close friends in the military were also, the wives were her close friends. And I was demonized. And it actually just made it such that most of those, there were a few guys that kind of stuck by me. But most of them, it was very, very difficult for them to keep a relationship with me. So there was no motivation whatsoever to try to, take the easy road financially, go back, join the army, back to Canada, do the HR director's role and carry on, because I would have ended up in a basement flat alone. The motivation was extremely powerful to stay here and make a go of it with Cara. And that is the strength of our relationship, Cara and my relationship, and frankly, the love we have for one another. And I can't say enough, particularly to people who are in unhappy relationships, about how you can find your person late in life.
And
and so it was brutal, absolutely brutal. But on the other hand, I was so happy, so happy to be with Cara and sharing this life. And even though there were all these challenges, again, it's like, okay,
because that's when I met you guys. And you were happy. I mean, you still are, right? And, I mean, not just in your relationship, but in general, it was like, and I think, again, just to try and pull it back, change is hard, right? And I mean, yours is extreme, but we mustn't belittle people who are trying to make change in the stage of life. You were what, probably late 40s, early 50s, or whatever. Just about, So and I'm not going to talk about my situation, but I'm 58 and I've just left, the security of a lifetime career in a corporate, and it's still fucking hard. And 6 months into it, is hard. And I keep having doubts, right? Because, the easy thing is just to go back to what was, it was bad, but it wasn't, it didn't feel as hard as going through the change.
I mean, for us,
but we've got to go through the change. It's like the dentist analogy. You're in the dentist having the tooth pulled. It's very painful. But when you walk out, the pain is gone, right? That's better than living with that pain.
Absolutely. And, obviously going back to my previous marriage is, not something that would even be possible, nor desirable. But, almost 6 years on, the idea of going back to the army in Canada it's on the table. I mean, it's not, it's like plan F, of things, but it's an opportunity that could be, but it would be that Cara would come back to Canada. Like everything is about Cara and I being together. Everything. And so while that period of transition from my Army career and going through the divorce and, starting a new job here and then losing that job and then job hunting and, all the financial insecurity and everything was horrible. Absolutely. I mean, there were there were tears shed. There were moments when, are we going to be in poverty? How can I afford to, am I going to have to work for the rest of my life if I can ever find a job again? How are we going to make this work?
Yeah.
Was always tempered by the fact that it was all about Cara and I figuring out how to be together. And that was the central theme and aim and motivation behind it. So,
and and again, imagine somebody going through that process of, like, say, exiting a corporate environment they fucking hate it. It's stress, it's bad for their health, it's whatever. They're trying to make that change. They're also trapped in a pretty much awful relationship, marriage, that how do you that's this person I was referencing. That's her situation. It's like, there's this compulsion to change, and there's this absolute anchor, this steel band, and it's tough. I don't know what to advise them other than, look, you just got to make the changes you need to make, and it's hard.
And I have someone very close to me who's in a similar kind of a situation, and they're, so earth-shatteringly unhappy, but not brutal. Able to see how, primarily from a financial perspective, they could move forward.
It's always financial,
and then there's some younger kids involved, so then it's worrying about the relationship with them and caring for them, whether the other partner is going to care for them as well as they, that.
No, it's difficult.
So,
man.
I mean, I get it 100%. And but I think also for me, there's a sense of, like, drive forward through the adversity. And I, always go back to some of, in my mind, from a motivating myself perspective, to some of the tougher things that I did in the Army, whether that was in, training courses
and the experiences,
operational experiences where there wasn't an option. I mean, there's always an option to quit, but I wouldn't, I'm stubborn. And so I wouldn't allow myself to quit. And so there's a certain amount of, like, I'm not going to quit. Like, this is
grit.
really bad.
It's grit.
Really, really bad, but I'm going to make it work. I'm going to find a way. And if even, you just put your head down and keep going.
I'm hoping, that, Tim, that somebody watching this or listening to this is going to go, you know what? I can fucking do it. It's going to be hard, man. But it's not hard forever, right? It is the dentist analogy. I've got to go through the pain of having this tooth pulled, but then after it, I have no pain, right? So as hard as it is, the choice is live with this awful situation in perpetuity, or go through short-term, much worse situation to make a change. But anyway, let's go back to, you've got to Christmas. You've checked out of this perpetual job hunting in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
And something else happens.
Well, so we were in a situation at the time where Cara was sharing custody of her two teenage kids with her ex. So they were kind of week with us, week with him, back and forth. And they were of an age where we kind of had about a 5-year horizon before they would be, where we could be confident that they were, off into adulthood and not dependent on having a home to come back to on, in the evening and that kind of a thing. So I, obviously was thinking, as I was sort of recharge my batteries over the holidays and didn't job hunt, thinking, okay, well, I need to do something. Like, sure, we have enough money now that I could stay home and be a stay-at-home dad, and it was fine while I was doing it. But really, I need something more than that. Cara was working a job that she could work from home from, but it wasn't particularly satisfying, and wasn't super happy in that job. And of course, we both were CrossFitters.
Yeah.
Loved CrossFit, met at a CrossFit gym.
Yeah. So we met.
That was exactly. And that was kind of our jam, so all through COVID, we're, doing our little CrossFit workouts in the back garden and all that sort of a thing. And we'd made the decision during COVID to leave the CrossFit gym that we were at. And we're kind of doing our own thing. And then as the country sort of started coming out of and then back into and out of COVID again, and things were open and then closed and open and closed, we started thinking about, well, where are we going to work out? What gym are we going to go to when all this COVID stuff is over? And because we'd chosen to leave the gym we were at, and there wasn't another CrossFit gym within about 30 minutes drive, we thought, well, what if we opened our own gym? And it seemed at the time to be a really good fit. We had some financial security. We just, like I said, just bought a house, and had an understanding of what our incomes were, and had an understanding that we could live off of my pension income for a period of time. We thought, we could work together, something we can do together. And we've got this sort of 5-year horizon where, we don't want to be here in Newbury forever.
Yeah.
It's not, we don't feel like it's our forever home.
Yeah.
We were both here circumstantially. Initially from a work perspective. We were brought here by our jobs. Or by in her case, by her ex-husband's job. So we thought, okay, well, what are we going to do for 5 years? Well, let's open a CrossFit gym. 5 years seems like a good amount of time to make it or not make it, with the objective being that at the 5-year mark, when we were then free from a sort of child rearing parenting perspective, we could make a decision to sell or to hire some, have developed staff by that point, grown enough that we had staff that could run it, and then we just stepped back. So we decided to start a business. Which also, ironically, having gone through this whole executive career transition process over the previous couple of years, being an entrepreneur was never something that was on the radar for me.
It's completely the opposite.
Completely. I was institutionalized, big institution.
How do you go from
guy,
the military to being an entrepreneur?
So anyways, so we opened, so as the UK finally came out of COVID, we opened the doors of a CrossFit gym. And
and I walked through the door.
And you walked through those doors. Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant.
So we, obviously, the business was quite successful.
Still is,
not to, make light of how much work it was or anything like that, but it was, we did a good job. The business did well. We never really took much of an income out of it, but we were fortunate that we could live on my pension. So that allowed us to then essentially put most of the revenue back into the business. And took that pressure off the first kind of 18 months or so where there wasn't, or where there was maybe just enough revenue to pay the bills, cover the costs. And then we were at about the 1.5 or 2 year mark into the business, well on the way. Meeting our kind of growth targets and all that sort of thing. And then the situation changed with Cara's kids, and they moved in full time with their dad, and then he moved away, quite a distance away. And obviously, very, very difficult time for Cara. But of course, we had this business to run, so we were, putting aside the, emotional kind of stuff going on as an aside. We're focused on running this business, and so we just carried on. We're on a 5-year plan, and we got about another 6 months down the road.
You realize the whole rationale for that 5-year plan is gone, right? Because it was about the Cara's kids,
and not to overstate it, but when you run a small business as a couple, and you're not at a point yet where you have very many staff, and it's a business that is based on, customer service as well as managing equipment and
And it's long
a
hours,
facility.
I know, like, the first work hours at 6 o'clock, you've got to be there
Yeah,
before that. And
you know,
it's
and you're
brutal.
doing all those things yourself,
Yeah.
and the boutique gym or micro gym industry is,
Tough.
sort of social media heavy, it's
Mm.
client engagement heavy. It was exhausting.
Mm.
And then particularly with the emotional kind of baggage or trauma of the situation with Kara's kids, we got about 6 months down the road and we thought, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? The rationale, the 5-year plan doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
And by that point, we'd been living for a couple of years on my pension income,
Yeah.
pretty much my pension income alone. What's the point? Do we just
Yeah.
keep on doing this and working
Yeah.
7 days a week?
Yeah.
Long days, and we were fortunate at the time that we'd had a young fella who we'd brought on full time, and he was keen and interested in taking over the business, and so we made a deal with him, and
So it was another big change, because it wasn't just selling the business; it was selling the house and buying a boat. I mean, you don't do half measures, right?
No.
It's like,
no. Yeah, no, my dad laughs at me a lot for that.
yeah, but
Everything
but
is.
but, but it's inspirational to me. It's I said to you, I saw you guys. I don't know when were you here, about earlier in the year. Remember when
Last year when we were
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
No,
I said to you,
yeah, it was about this time
because
last year.
you've been saying to me, you've said to me several times since we've met, it's like, Stephen, when are you going to change what you're doing, right? Because I know that it wasn't working for me. And we had lunch, and I said to you, you may not remember this. I said to you that I'll get out by Remembrance Day,
Mm-hmm.
so November. And I said that to one other person, which was Craig Brown.
Right.
I had a beer with him, and I said to him, right, and I beat that by 3 or 4 months,
Yeah.
right? But it was kind of, I needed to say that to then say, well,
You've said it, so now
Tim's
you have
probably
to do
going to
it.
remember that. Now
Mhm.
I've got to do it, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think sometimes we just need some encouragement, right? We need somebody
Yeah.
to say, look, and it's something else you said to me. We were chatting WhatsApp, and it's like, because there's huge financial implications, right? As there were for you and whatever. And you said, what was your comment? You said to me, it's money's just maths with emotion, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's not quite. But
Yeah.
sometimes we need somebody just to be in our corner going, just do it.
Yeah.
But do
Yeah.
it, and because a lot of the reservation for making change like this is, what are people going to think, right? Because I'm going to have, a lesser car and maybe a smaller house, and I'm going to earn less money. And does that make me less or whatever? It doesn't, by the way. It actually makes you
absolutely.
better in terms of the person you want to be.
Absolutely.
But we all have this fear, particularly people from a corporate background, where your ego, your social status, all of that is, you're conditioned to that. So, yeah, you don't
Listen,
but, thanks for punting me out.
Yeah. It's no different in the military. I've got mates who are still serving, who are colonels, brigadiers, 2-star generals, who have said to me, well, I can't retire yet. My pension's not big enough. And I just want to, say to them, because the longer you serve and the higher your base salary, the more your pension is. Yeah. The larger the percentage of your base salary. And then, of course, if your base salary is 100,000, 200,000, the longer you serve and the higher rank you are, the bigger your pension is. And I think, well, how big is big enough?
How much
what is it? How much money do you need every month? Yeah. What is it that you're doing that you need? And, this person who's close to me that I was talking about, who's stuck in this relationship, is in a similar place in their head about money. They've got to have X amount of money. They've got to have that new vehicle every couple of years, and they're not able to rationalize their way out of that.
And the truth is, we don't. Right? I'm going through that right now. But it's the stumbling block is not the actual finance. It's the fear of the perception of others.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to be poorer, right?
Yeah.
And actually, for 6 months I've been poorer. it's not a problem, right?
No, exactly.
I don't buy what I used to buy, which is spending a lot of money on things I didn't need in the first place.
Yeah.
And look, there are real challenges, but it once I punched through that fear of what other people are going to think, and that it's so many doors open.
Mm-hmm.
Everything becomes easier when you say, look, the people who matter, they're not going to go, I don't care. They're going to cheer you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the people who don't matter, well, you know what? They didn't matter anyway. Right. So,
Yeah.
cheers,
Yeah.
you're gone kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. A friend of mine said to me while I was going through my divorce, those guys that don't matter, they were just stones in your rucksack that you've been carrying, and now you've taken those stones out of your rucksack.
Yeah. It's good.
So,
Good analogy.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
To back up, all my life I'd had this dream about sailing.
Yeah.
And,
I know that.
and not necessarily, sailing around I would say sailing around the world, but not sailing around the world as in I must achieve a circumnavigation, but living on and traveling on a sailboat.
Yeah.
Sort of a romantic dream.
Yeah.
But it had been sort of a consistency throughout my life.
Because you've sailed all your life. As in,
Well,
not.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't own a sailboat until later.
I mean, you
when
could
my kids
sail, right? It was an interest.
Yeah, it was an interest I had. Yeah, for sure.
A leisure activity.
Yes. And when I went through my divorce and Cara and I were trying to make a go of it here, I sort of let that dream go, because I realized that it, in the context of my life at the time, it wasn't that important to me. And I thought, if I never do that, it's okay, because I've made this new life for Cara and I, and I'm very happy in this life. And I don't feel the need to fulfill this dream or this fantasy I have of doing this. But in the course of those couple of years of running the gym, Cara and I started talking about it, and we started watching some, YouTube, content creators who were living on boats, and we did a little.
To be clear, Cara's a sun lizard. She likes the sun.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. Like if she could live in a bikini and, and that's it the rest of her life. So, and then we did a little sailing vacation in the Caribbean one year while we were still running the gym, just to see, if she would like it. And she really liked it. And she thought, okay, this is something. So it was something that had sort of reappeared on my horizon as a potential retirement activity.
Yeah.
But of course, we had this 5-year plan.
Yeah.
So after her kids moved away, and we sort of we continued on toiling as you do, because that's your life. And then we sort of got to the point where we had this sort of conversation, what are we doing? Why are we working so hard? Where our lives are consumed by this business. And, while the business was a source of great happiness for us and everyone involved, and there were so many positives to it, there's also, it's a bit isolating. It's a bit lonely. It's like being a commander in the army. You're on your own at the head of this organization. And we were going through this, a lot of emotional, difficulty, primarily related to her kids and mine, who weren't speaking to me at the time. So we said, why are we doing this? We've got kind of a nice nest egg. Some of it's in the business, most of it's in the house. We've realized that for the last 2 years, we can live off of my pension income. What are we literally working towards? What are we trying to achieve? And we took the decision that it just wasn't important to keep kind of toiling in this business. And coincidentally, fortuitously, we had this young fellow working for us who was super keen. And we had several conversations with him. We were pretty transparent about our thoughts about potentially selling or leaving. And, he was open to initially, maybe being a general manager and running the business for us. And then the longer he worked for us, he was more interested in just taking over. So the stars sort of aligned in that sense. And we went to a boat show in France, and we had an opportunity to put a deposit down on a new build boat, which was going to be about a year in the building. And at the time, we were looking initially at used boats, obviously, just like buying a used car, a lot less money.
Yeah.
But at the time, the market post-COVID was such that actually used boats were in really high demand.
Okay.
And we would have spent more money on a used boat
yeah,
than putting a deposit down and committing to a new.
Yeah.
So we put a deposit down on a new boat, and then we, now we're back into almost crisis management mode because we had a timeline by which we had to have the balance. So we needed to get the business ready, sell the business, get some, income out of that, put the house on the market, sell the house, downsize everything, which fortunately we'd both already downsized through the processes of moving to the UK because Cara had been living in the US previously. So we had big houses and downsized to move to the UK, then downsized in the divorces. I mean, I got a couple of items of furniture and some clothes in an IKEA bag and my laptop out of the divorce, and that's about it. So downsize, move onto a boat, take delivery, all that stuff. So so we just, this dream I'd had all of my life kind of represented itself at an opportune time and circumstance in our lives. And Cara was interested and keen to try.
There's also, I mean, this is going to sound slightly mumbo jumbo, but I think it's it was Goethe, the philosopher, or he said that I'm misquoting him slightly, but not verbatim, but he said, whatever you believe and want to do, begin it.
Yeah.
Because the minute you move, the universe conspires to help you, right? And what he's basically saying is take the step, begin the journey. And because you can spend so much time trying to think of all the different scenarios, and they all blow up in the second week or figuratively anyway. So it's like, you guys, you got to a point, right? The 5-year plan, that the rationale for that is gone now. And then things happen, Kieran, the GM, the opportunity to sell the business, all of that happened. We need to wrap here. Okay. But there's a part 2, right? We need to do part 2.
Sure.
Now, you guys are coming back, so we can do it then. I think that will be good. We'll have had Christmas and whatever. But we need to do part 2 because there's more, Tim, to the story that I think can help people have hope that you can change, right?
Absolutely.
And your change has been tough, man, for you and Cara. It's been absolutely brutal. But I know you guys. I know where you are now emotionally and whatever. So it can be done, right?
Yeah.
So we need to go to part 2, not least because I have a small feature in part 2, which is me coming sailing with you guys, which is fucking awesome.
It was awesome. Yeah.
So we need to talk about that. But also, we need to talk a little bit about, go back in time a little bit through some of your experiences, because there's some experiences and some painful experiences you've been through that have shaped who you are and contributed to that grit you had to have to get through what we just discussed. So right, end of part 1, my friend. Thank you very much. We're going to do part 2.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, the part 2 is it's not like it's and then everyone lived happily ever after. The happily ever after is still going through change and making some tough decisions about how we're going to live our lives and all of that.